Good evening, everyone, and welcome to this fourth debate of term. This House believes the global economy is still an imperial one. Just to run ever so briefly through the rules again, it's your rights as members to exercise points of information during the 6 paper speakers this evening, but it is equally the prerogative of our paper speakers to deny taking a point of information. There'll be a proposition and opposition speaker, followed by a round of floor speeches from the audience, and we'll repeat this 2 more times until the end of the evening. Reference to rules can be found at the back of your order papers, which each of you should have. So, without further ado, speaking first in proposition of this motion is Kartik Sawhney. Kartik's a first-year MPhil student reading history at Jesus. He won the right to speak through open audition. You have the ears of the House.
Thank you, Mr. President, and thank you, members, for being here. I hope you'll be patient with me as I briefly welcome my mother and my girlfriend in the crowd here today, and my father watching the live stream all the way in India. I would also like to thank a good mate, Scott Robinson, for encouraging me to apply for this debate and supporting me as I wrote the speech you're all about to hear. The opposition is going to tell you a fairy tale of strong institutions and a lack of corruption being the cause of our success. They will go down the rabbit hole of free trade and economic liberalization. They may even smile that Cheshire cat smile and enlighten us all, adumbrating the altruistic values of foreign aid, extolling in congratulatory tones our 0.7% of GNP that we in the UK spend on aid. Well, ladies and gentlemen of the Union, I hope you're ready for tea with the Mad Hatter, because we're all Alice and the opposition are taking us to Wonderland. Narratives of post-colonial innocence and free trade globalization creating an even playing field are far from the truth. Now, historians like myself can talk for days about how the industrial rise of rich countries depended on extraction from the global south during the colonial era. Now, and receive little to no challenge to that statement. However, many of you would be shocked by the argument that we in the West still rely upon extraction and exploitation from the global south. And these imperial economic models prevail. And not only do they prevail, they are thriving. Today, we in the West drain $2.2 trillion worth of commodities from the global south every year. That is enough to end extreme global poverty 15 times over. Since the overt imperial age supposedly ended in the 1960s, the global north has drained $62 trillion from the global south. That includes billions of tons worth of raw material and human labor, and it's embodied in the phones in your pockets, in the laptops in your rucksacks, and in the cars that you drive. All of these commodities that are manufactured for a fraction of the price that you pay for them, but the profits remain here, in the West. Now you might be asking, how do they keep on getting away with this? I'd like to make some progress before I accept your... Thank you. Now you might be asking, how do they keep on getting away with this? One answer lies in the Bretton Woods institutions, such as the IMF and the World Bank. These institutions, purportedly designed to foster global economic stability, perpetuate a system that disproportionately favors the West. The conditions attached to loans and aid packages often impose economic policies that favor the interests of the powerful, exacerbating inequality. Let me give you just one example out of thousands. After the 1997 Asian financial crash, the IMF constructed a mammoth financial package. 17 billion for Thailand, 43 billion for Indonesia, 57 billion for Korea. However, the price that these countries paid far outweighed the benefits. Indonesia had to sell off state assets. They were forced to restructure their banking system, not for the purpose of creating a stronger banking system in Indonesia, but rather to facilitate further penetration of Western banks into the region. Now, this is supposedly an institution that is supposed to create a more fair and equitable global economic society, but are they asleep at the wheel, or are they just devious imperial actors? And what happened to Indonesia's debt? Was it forgiven? No. Was it written off? No. In that same Cheshire cat manner, it was merely rescheduled. And here's the worst part. The IMF demanded that loan repayments took precedence over health and education spending. This was in a country where 55% of the population exists on less than $2 a day. More than half, less than $2 a day. So I ask you, when Indonesia was at its most vulnerable, did the IMF help them out? I think you know the answer. It's no. They took advantage of their economic vulnerability for the benefit of Western banks, and the burden fell upon the poorest in Indonesian society, exactly as it has done in countless other nations for the last 400 years under an imperial global economy. The trope of post-colonial benevolence designates societies as dependent when they are, in fact, imperial economies. We've seen the example in Indonesia. Let's consider a more recent example in Haiti. In 2010, after the earthquake, the US allocated $379 million in aid and sent in 5,000 troops. 33 cents of each dollar was actually given directly back to the US to reimburse themselves for sending in their own military. 42 cents of each dollar went to private and public NGOs. Hardly any went directly to Haitians or their government. This claim that Haiti and other nations have survived and sustained through post-colonial generosity has been described as a charitable industrial complex, where humanitarian assistance operates as a form of venture capitalism. This imperial economic power doesn't just manifest as numbers on a balance sheet. It translates into the daily lives of citizens in the global south. Let's take a look at our iPhones to demonstrate how the global north exploits the global south, with the global north keeping all the profits. The most basic version of the latest iPhone costs Apple around £350 to make. Apple then charges you, the consumer, a markup of over 100%, selling it around £800. And how is Apple able to keep these costs so low? They use a Taiwanese firm called Foxconn, which in turn contracts workers in mainland China, these workers who work in such poor conditions that Foxconn has had to install suicide nets outside the windows. Workers are informally employed as interns with no contract working and working over 12 hours per day and getting paid a paltry £2 per hour. Using this business model, for every Chinese worker that is exploited, a shareholder of Apple is rewarded. And this business model is the same for all smartphones all around the world. And the worst part, these companies do not need to do this. They do not need to have a markup of over 100% to be viable. They don't need it to be profitable. There are countless examples of companies that use ethical labor practices at home and succeed. A new Toyota Corolla, for example, will cost the consumer £30,000. And how much profit does it make? A mere £500, less than 2% profit margin. So do not tell us that it cannot be done. When the business model, go on.
Why are you focusing on China and not the Democratic Congo where cobalt actually comes from?
Because I focused on Haiti and I focused on China and I only have 10 minutes. So when the business model of developed country manufacturing has produced the most successful car company in the world, the pure and simple reason for Apple's outsourcing is not need, it's an imperial greed. Under American law, products manufactured in China are required to be labeled as such. And Apple do that. But their unique rendition of the statement, plastered over the back of our phones, tablets, and fancy MacBooks, is illustrative of one of the planet's starkest economic divides. Designed by Apple in California, assembled in China. So the cutting edge is conceived and designed in Silicon Valley, but it's assembled by hand in China. And furthermore, what on earth are they designing? It's the same every bleeding year. Go on.
You outlined horrendous examples of exploitation, but is exploitation the same thing as imperialism?
In this context, an example I'm about to come out to next, it's tantamount to slavery. So the first iPhone is Apple's second greatest innovation. Their greatest is how to circumvent legislation and offshore production to the global south, all to the end of maximizing their share price on the New York Stock Exchange. So let me tell you a story about Tian Zhu. Tian was younger than most people in this room today when she started working at Foxconn. She was only 17. Tian's job was inspecting screens to ensure they were not scratched. Her day consisted of waking at 6:30 a.m., attending an unpaid meeting at 7:20 a.m., and starting work 20 minutes later, only to skip all meals in order to make sure that her managers were happy that she'd worked a 12-hour shift. At the end of her first month, Tian received no wages because of an administrative error that no one helped her to resolve. With no friends, no communication, and no money, Tian jumped from her dormitory window. Tian is now paralyzed from the waist down and has had to relearn how to brush her teeth, dress herself, and sit up, and has started to weave slippers to get by. She was only owed £140 in basic pay and overtime, or around a quarter of the new iPhone 5 that she was designing. It's a reality we must confront, and emotions must stir within us as we recognize the responsibility we bear. The global economy can and should be an active and breathing expression of our compassion, of our innovation, and most importantly, our drive to lift our fellow peoples out of poverty. This is a choice. It's a choice we can afford to make, but until we make that choice, the global economy is and will remain imperial.